Welcome to another episode of Inflection. I am Brian Berletic. Joining me, as always, is Angelo Giuliano. This is going to be the last Inflection for 2021, and we're going to kind of do a review. What's been going on over this last year and what we expect to see in the coming year. How are you doing, Angelo?
Hi, Brian. Great. It's been a very busy year, and I think it's a good idea just to do a recap, just look what happened in 2021 and or projecting for next year.
Yes. And by the way, questions and answers are open for the entire episode. So if you have anything that you want to talk about, just put it in the comment section and we'll try to get to it. As a matter of fact, right before the show started, let's do this. Someone was asking about the U.S. doing a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics next year, February, and then quietly for all these visas for their diplomats. So the U.S. is just completely off the walls. I mean, just completely crazy. Everything they do is almost cartoonish. This chest beating about how they're going to boycott it because there's all this genocide going on. And then they're going to send diplomats anyway. So they're telling you, and they're doing this in front of the entire globe, they're telling you it's not serious. It's all a game. They don't take it seriously. So why should the public take it seriously? Angelo, what did you think of it? I didn't think it was real news. I thought it was fake news. And then, like, here it is in the South China Morning Post. Angelo, what do you think about that?
Well, it reminds me how the U.S. is actually pushing other nations not to boycott, and they go themselves. It's the same with Taiwan. They pushed Lithuania to go against China, in favor of Taiwan, just to please the U.S. and it's backfiring. While on the other side, the U.S. is still recognizing the one China policy. It's all hypocrisy. They're sending their allies, to the fire, and while on the other side, now we see that they are sending diplomats there. They're saying that it's security, but I think it's probably a mix of diplomats. So it's just pure hypocrisy, and it's all a game of showmanship. It's just to please people back home. The big news of boycott was like 99%, and then this small news is not covered. So it's just pure hypocrisy.
And what will probably happen, and we've seen this many times, the U.S. will say this and make a big deal about it in the news. And just like you said, like 90% of Americans will think that the U.S. boycotted the Olympics. They'll completely miss this news. And then when you tell them, no, diplomats did actually go, they'll say that that's fake news and you're an agent for the CCP. This just happens over and over and over again. It's pretty ridiculous. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's do a recap of the whole year, and then we can talk some more about what's going on now and what we think is going to happen in the next year. And I was looking back at these old videos. This goes all the way back to January 2021. So I'm looking at some of these videos. I don't even have over 1,000 views. My channel was still just getting going. And as a matter of fact, people might not know this, but I started making videos in October 2020, and it was all thanks to Angelo and a small group of people on Twitter, actually, who helped me get going with those videos. And so from October 2020 until now, so 2021 was really my first full year of doing videos. And, I think the quality has improved over time. When did we start doing Inflection? I think it was around the time of, I think in February, because the coup in Myanmar, we started covering that pretty often. And we were doing that on Inflection. So a lot of stuff happened this year. I think the situation exploding in Myanmar, I think this uptick in tensions around Taiwan, I think the U.S., withdrawing from Afghanistan, I think these are all really big key events. I think the protests dying down here in Thailand and never really getting going in Malaysia, I think that's also very important. Angelo, if you had to pick just a couple of the biggest events that stand out in your mind, what would they be?
Well, probably one of the biggest is Taiwan. It's I think the true front. I mean, Look at the geopolitics when it comes to the two blocks, Russia, China, and the US and Europe. There's two fronts. There's we haven't covered much, but I think Ukraine is a potential front, and then you have Taiwan. When it comes to Taiwan, it's just the US is it's renegating all its commitment when it comes to one China policy. It's pure hypocrisy. They call it strategic ambiguity, but it's just you have an agreement and you break your agreement. The same
Yeah.
as Ukraine is the same. Remember, NATO was not supposed to expand eastward, and they're expanding eastward, and this is why Putin is being firm. He's being saying, well, stop now. I mean, this is national security for us. You cannot have NATO forces on the door of Russia. So it's just this game, but it's very dangerous. I think what is interesting is that, I mean, look at the wars that the US has fought. I mean, we are talking about very small armies. I mean, the biggest was probably Iraq, but you couldn't compare. I mean, we're talking about 100 times more spending. Now we are talking about Russia and China, and of course there's a risk of war, but I think there's a lot of bluff there because it's mutual destruction here. So I think it's important just to at least just to inform people, to keep on doing this job. And I was thinking, I think we can all fight. Everyone can fight, can go on social media, and debunk all the fake news. It's we all fight in our ways. And in informing people in different dimensions. We writing articles, going on social media, because it's very important. And I think that the most important task is before there's a clash. Once there's a clash, I mean, what do you want to do? I mean, Brian, you're not going to take up arms, right? I mean, we're not. Then it's too late, and then we'll be saying, well, you know what, I think on the other side is. I just wonder sometimes if people do realize what it means to have a war and the consequences, even if you don't have physical contact, but in terms of economy, it would be a complete collapse because all economies are integrated.
Yeah.
It's just absurdity. So so I think, I think we need to keep on doing what we're doing, Brian. I think it's important. Just when it comes to me, I don't know for you, but I think it's about how to deal emotionally, because it's not nice. It is not
Yeah.
nice. We don't have fun doing this, but it's important just to tell people really what is at stake here. It's
Yeah.
big. It's big. And I think it's unique in the world history, and it's a pity because people don't learn from history. I mean, this could be far bigger than World War II. I mean, really, in World War II was mainly conventional, except with two bombs, nuclear bombs in Japan. But this could be far more devastating. And
Yeah.
yeah,
People should just think about in our lifetime, September 11th, 2001, the attacks in New York City and Washington, and how that permanently disfigured U.S. society in terms of security, the way people do business, way people travel. This growing police state in the U.S. to address attacks that really were a result of U.S. foreign policy. And some people say it's an inside job. If they're saying it was all Saudi terrorists and they were all radicalized by Saudi Wahhabism, state-sponsored extremism, and it's America's closest ally in the Middle East, and they invaded every country around Saudi Arabia except for Saudi Arabia. I mean, just do some basic thinking of what that all adds up to and what that means, and then just think of that. That was relatively small to what would happen if there was a war between the U.S. and China. This isn't people in mountains with 40-year-old AK-47s. Just like you said, Angelo, China is nuclear armed. They have a very large standing army. All of their army is in China. They don't have it spread out all over the world. If there was a war in the Pacific between the U.S. and China, well, a lot of U.S. service members would perish in the conflict. This isn't something that they would escape. Think about the British operation in off the coast of Argentina, the Falkland Islands, or what I don't remember what they call it.
Malvinas
Totally different.
in Spanish, yes.
Yeah, so they had that conflict, and British ships were sunk, and British sailors died in that. That was very touch and go for the British there, and it would be something very similar. You're not going to watch the U.S. do this from a distance and their service members being totally protected. You're going to watch Chinese missiles sink U.S. ships. It will be terrible. It will impact the economy. Everyone, everywhere will suffer. Just think about everything that you have that comes from China. The U.S., their goal is to disrupt Chinese trade going into the country and out of the country. So just think of how that's going to impact everything. Look at what this COVID has done to the economy and society, and then imagine that 10 times worse. This is what we're facing. And you're absolutely right. You have to keep ahead of it. When the 2011 Arab Spring happened, this is when I started writing, because I knew that eventually it would come to Thailand. And I didn't know how much time I had to prepare for it. I just knew I had to start shouting, telling everybody that I could how the U.S. is doing this, how they aren't organic pro-democracy movements. This isn't any kind of real revolution. It's imperialism. It's modern day imperialism, and people need to be warned. And I had spent the last 10 years doing that through writing and now doing videos. And I honestly think that it is making a difference because you see a lot of people doing it. It's not just me. It's a lot of people doing it now, and it is making a difference. I would say this year, 2021, we have watched the establishment, whatever the establishment entails, they have been reacting to say all of the pro-China vloggers, or I would say expats living in China, saying positive things about China and just telling the truth and building up these large platforms. The West has had to react to that because it is having an impact. If it wasn't having an impact, they would be more than happy to ignore it. It is having an impact, so they're responding to it. So speaking up makes a difference. Getting involved, getting active, whatever your skill set is and what you can contribute, it makes a difference. We're watching it make a difference. Is it going to make enough of a difference? That is the question. And that's why Angelo, you and myself, we just do as much as possible, right? Always at the edge of, burning ourselves out, trying to get as much done as possible. So yeah, Taiwan is a huge one that popped up this year and will carry on over until next year. Ukraine had been relatively quiet for the longest time, and now it is a flashpoint in the making. That will carry over into next year, 2022. Let's see what else. And of course, all of the destabilization in Southeast Asia, this will continue. The protesters here in Thailand, they still come out. There's hardly any of them out in the streets, but they're still coming out. Why would they still be coming out if it was totally over? Just, ask yourself that. They're going to keep coming out. There's a window of opportunity they're waiting for. They've got this conflict going on in Myanmar. People are dying in that conflict. That is a serious conflict. And it's all interconnected. All of these U.S.-backed movements all work together. They have been for the longest time, and they're more openly doing it now. And so this is how we're going to go into the year 2022. It's basically, I would say, it's already kind of like an asymmetrical world war already. Angelo, yeah, have any extra thoughts on that, or should we?
Well, I think there's another thing which is I see a new trend is de-dollarization more and more. There are deals now, for example, like Indonesia and China, they are going to trade more and more using not the dollar. So I think that if we take a higher view, it's the dollar. That's the ultimate thing that is holding this imperialistic project. Once the dollar is gone, the whole economy, Western economy are going to suffer extremely because of that, because they are on a free lunch. Imagine you need money, you just print, and you need to buy something, you just print money. You can do that if you have a currency which is a world currency. But once it's no more world currency, it's a national currency, then you create hyperinflation. And we're seeing that right now in the US. If you take purchasing power parity, not purchasing, sorry, the real CPI index, it's actually 15%. They just changed the calculation. The calculation they used to do was in the 1980s, and they changed that because it was inconvenient. So it means that the $1 that you had last year is you can buy 15% less goods with that. And why is it that? Because you're spending more than you should be. So you import more than you export. There's a huge trade deficit, and you cannot go on like this. And they're holding to that onto that. And I think for the West and for the US, the casus belli was on the dollar. When China and Russia started dealing not with dollar gradually, I think for them was the casus belli, because you're touching the wallet. It comes down always to wallet. Of course, they're using human right, democracy, cultural differences, because it's much easier. But other than that, I mean, it's about a very small elite of 1% of the elites that are living in 4% of the world population. The US is 4%. It's not the US we are actually condemning here. It's that 1% that wants to hold on to power. And this 1% actually doesn't care about countries. Their projects, the project of the elites, is about destruction of nation state, and it's going to be a world that has no boundaries, but are controlled by elites, big corporation, and they want to subvert the global south. It's not in their interest that those countries industrialize. And I think additional to that, I think we need to be really careful of this project of COP26. Of course, we're not climate change denier, we're not. But I think it's important that to look at this project as a hijacking of this cause. Who's behind this? If you look at the background of COP26, was all very large big corporation, the financial, the banksters. And what they want is actually to say, well, we've been polluting the world for 200 years. Now, the global south, you have to be green. Even though you have no electricity, you have no road, you have no paved road, but we are going to slow down your development. You see how hypocritical is that? So
Yes.
it's important to look at the big picture. I think it's important that we go into single country geopolitics, the proxy war. I think in every clashes around the world, you are going to have a proxy war, which is either US China, US Russia, and then we have to take a higher view. Really, it's the ultimate. It's the US dollar, it's the elite, and it's this project of destruction of nation state. And they want to have a world which is in the image of what you have in the US. The same values. If you look at those projects like pro-democracy, self-proclaimed pro-democracy project around the world, they use the same slogans, and it's all based on American values. I think the world is much more complex. Again, I think each country should cherish their own value, and they have to choose their own path. I mean, this is our stance. It's anti-globalism and self-determination. Especially when it comes to democracy, we always repeat this over and over. Democracy starts when you have sovereignty. With no sovereignty, there's no democracy. So this is why we strongly against meddling.
Yeah, and that's great that you brought up the U.S. dollar. So that is actually a huge thing. Say for Myanmar, for example, trading on the border with China using Chinese currency, not the U.S. dollar anymore. Russia and China have started doing this. Iran and China are starting to do this. And so what's happening is the U.S. has put sanctions on so many people that they all got together and they're making an alternative system. And then they're going to move on without the U.S. They don't need the U.S. anymore because China is filling that space where they're able to fill the gap in terms of technology, investment, infrastructure, everything that a country needs, China can provide now, and they could do it more directly with less strings attached, more efficiently. I mean, there's things that China's doing right now that the U.S. literally couldn't do even if they wanted to. The high-speed rail through Laos, for example, that is in operation right now. That is a big thing that happened in 2021. That happened. That's something that China built for Laos. That's something the U.S., even if they wanted to, could not do. They couldn't do that in their own country. They can't do it in Laos. And so this is what China is doing, and this is what's shifting everything from, the center of global power from west toward the east. And why shouldn't it? Because most of the world's population lives in the east. They don't live in the U.S. They don't live in Europe. This is a very small percentage of the global population, and yet the West has this oversized influence on everything that everyone does. And I'm also glad that you brought up climate change and also say the whole COVID thing. These are all real things that are happening, but the U.S. and the corporations that run the U.S. and have too much influence over Europe as well, they have hijacked all of this, and they're just plundering the world, using this as a pretext. It's not that they're not real issues that we have to deal with. It's just they're taking advantage of it, and just like they do with everything else, they're lying about it. They're distorting everything, and they're not going to actually seriously address any of it. It's just like the war on terror. They had no intention of ever actually ending the war on terror. They wanted to keep it going for as long as possible. That's why they stayed in Afghanistan for almost 2 decades. They were trying to stretch it out as long as possible, as long as profitable. There was no interest in actually solving any of these problems. And you could see that that's how the U.S. differs from China. China goes into some place to solve problems and to do it in a very practical way. The U.S. is great at lip service and perpetuating problems because it's profitable. It's two entirely different approaches. And I think the West got away with it for so long because the Western media was able to control the narrative, and there was no alternative. There was nothing for people to compare it to, so they just went along with it. Now there is a point of reference that they can compare it to, and for a lot of people, it's just the way the West does things doesn't add up. And you even see the West kind of recognizing that. This year was the rollout, and then I guess the quick death of Build Back Better World.
It's gone.
US,
have you seen that? It's
gone.
Actually, we don't talk about this, but it's like flashpoint. It's just internally in the US, you are going to gain some points, but there's nothing. They even have a problem just to get a bill signed just for their own infrastructure. I mean, they even have a problem with that. I mean, imagine. I mean, and you want to, build back US first. I mean, before trying to build back the world. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense in terms of the dollar. I mean, the whole strategy. Why China is doing the Belt and Road Initiative is it's about recycling US dollar trade surplus into the global South. I mean, basically, just to simplify, normally in normal times, what countries would do would be to recycle into either US economy or to buy US debt. There was the whole Ponzi scheme, and we need to go back to really, this whole hegemony, how it started, after war, the Bretton Woods Agreement, and the pegging to the dollar. It's important, always just to go back to history. I mean, how did we get to where we are? And I think this exercise we need to really, I think for people just to have a good understanding of present politics, we need to get back to at least World War I, World War II, at least, because we'll never be objective to understand why are we here. I mean, how can you understand Taiwan issue if you don't go back to Taiwan? I mean, Chinese history. I mean, basic Chinese history, the humiliation of China for 100 years. Back then, the 8 countries, they came into China and they wanted to split. Oh, you take this piece, I take this piece. That's recent history. For people, they think it's old history. It's recent. And people assume that this was like this then, but now the US is different. It's the same as like civil rights in the US. I mean, when did the blacks had the right to vote? I mean, we're talking about the 60s, right? But that's recent history. Don't expect 40, 50 years of later a country to have changed. It's more subtle. The slavery has taken different forms. I'm just going to, I'm going to be a bit cynical, about slavery. If you think about it, back in the old days, slaves were actually capital for farmers. It was a capital, so you had to actually protect your capital. You see what I mean? Because you would exchange, and you want it to last. I mean, it's like an asset. It's like a company has an asset. They changed that to have modern slavery, where actually they can drop you if you are in bad health. They are going to drop you completely. It's just more subtle, but ultimately it's a system of controlling people, controlling nations, controlling powers, and it's it's the natural selections. We are going to build up a group of strong people that are going to reign over a minority of weak people, and we divide them. The only way that we can control them is to divide them. So we are going to pour money into some minorities there. We create a constant chaos, and you can see the global south. It's been chaotic all the time. Why? Because it's better to do like this. It's modern warfare. You're not going to have boots on the ground. You are going to finance, like divisions. And we see this in Myanmar now. I mean, it's not because it's been decolonized that actually the armies, the British left, that it's free. It's not. It's never been free. You had a government in exile in Washington. They've been pouring lots of money, US aid, NED. They've been actually grooming Aung San Suu Kyi for 30 years.
Yeah, since she was a university student, they were grooming her to be a puppet in a client regime run by Washington and London. Yeah.
So it is complex. It is complex. So that's this hegemony. I mean, how it's going to change, and on the other side, I think they're really afraid of. I think a lot of people that haven't been to Asia, don't understand China. They're really afraid of this new world. I mean, just at least when it comes to cultural, are we going to have? I mean, imagine if China was as hegemonic as the US. I mean, it would be scary, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not just because China is focusing on itself, and it's very pragmatic. He wants to bring prosperity to its people. The legitimacy of the CPC is as long as it brings prosperity to its people. There's a check and balance. While in the West, there's no check and balance. You are elected, well, do whatever you want. Once you're elected, you're free.
Yeah.
I mean, you give the promise you want, but if you don't keep your promise, that's fine. It's fine.
And speaking of checks and balances, not only are there these checks and balances inside China, because they don't have elections for the national leadership, they have to deliver. They have to deliver. There is no wait for the election and get someone new. People understand that if they're not getting what they want, they know exactly who to lay the blame on, and there is no other option. Like let's vote, because that's what Western style democracy is all about. It's about giving the illusion of choice to people, but they don't decide anything, and it just goes on and on and on from one election cycle to the next. But also China's Belt and Road Initiative, what they're doing is, you were just talking about the global South and how the West has deliberately destabilized it perpetually for decades and decades, and how Myanmar never actually really got its independence. That was superficial. The US and the UK have maintained control over opposition groups from the day they got their so-called independence. And the military in Myanmar has been fighting nonstop for decades against these armed groups backed by the US and the UK. And so people ask, why is it like that in Myanmar? That's the reason why. And this is what they're fighting against. And they say, there's all of these atrocities. Yes, if you've been fighting a war for decades, there's going to be atrocities on both sides. You cannot have a war and not have atrocities. That's why it's best not to have a war in the first place. And why is there constant warfare in Myanmar? It's because of the West. They cannot stop interfering. If they stopped interfering, and you could see this is what China's doing. They're trying to build infrastructure across Myanmar to unite people, to connect all of these remote ethnic groups to the central economy so people have opportunities. So they put their weapons down, start building their lives. And the West refuses to let this happen. US aid will go in there and deliberately pump just enough money into like very, very basic provisional infrastructure for these ethnic groups, like rickety water towers, things to just keep them independent of the central government and central infrastructure, but not enough for them to actually have a decent life. So it keeps them hungry for warfare. They do this very deliberately. And so China building up countries, making them strong, connecting them to the Belt and Road Initiative, they're setting up a future where even if they wanted to be imperialists like the US, it would be very difficult, because now they've got this entire planet where all of these countries are built up. They have proper infrastructure. They have functioning economies. It would be very hard to exercise the sort of control over these countries that the US currently does over the global South. And what is the US doing? They said, build back better world. We know they're not going to do that. It was a joke. I think even as it was coming out of their mouth, they had to restrain themselves from laughing. But what are they really doing to contest the Belt and Road Initiative? This is something we've covered this year. Just outright terrorism in Pakistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. There have been multiple serious attacks on the infrastructure, the Chinese engineers coming in to help build it, and also an attempt on the life of the Chinese ambassador. This happened this year in Pakistan. And there are threats to the pipeline going through Myanmar now with this US-backed destabilization going on. There's an opposition here in Thailand that want to block the high-speed rail project, and this is what they're doing everywhere. And even though the US left Afghanistan, officially, they're going to continue trying to destabilize Afghanistan to prevent the Belt and Road Initiative from making any progress through there. So this is kind of the battlefield, the way it's really playing out versus how the US pretends it's playing out. They pretend that they're going to compete with China by offering a viable alternative. No, they're just going to burn everything down. And this is what they're openly doing. Now, I've been keeping an eye on the comments. Some people were talking about the expats in China and how the Western media accuses them all of being Chinese government agents, and how anyone anywhere in the world saying anything positive about China must be, on the payroll of the Chinese government. And it's so funny because they're always saying about how communism is this huge failure, and yet it seems like China has an endless supply of money. And I've actually seen Western articles saying the CCP is stuffing money into everybody's mouth. It's like, that must be nice to have that much money. Why are you against China's economic system if they have endless cash to stuff in everyone's mouth? It's just so ridiculous. I also saw someone talk about the Solomon Islands. That's a big one, actually. Solomon Islands is a very small country, tiny population, but symbolically it's very significant because the US and Taiwan had such a lock on the Solomon Islands, and they still opted to switch over to China, to Beijing. And they paid the price. There's this violence going on. There's separatism brewing, and yet they still decided to go with China because they see next year and the years to come being China's time to shine. And they know the West is a dead end. And there's no point in paying into that and paying the price for being a part of that. You talked about Lithuania, Angelo, and it's like, this is the price that you pay for being a U.S. ally. They put you up front, and you're just like a human shield. That's what you are. And they throw you into the meat grinder, and they stand back at a distance. This is what they will do. This is what you get for being an ally of the U.S. It happens every time. Lithuania, Ukraine,
Australia. I mean, look at the example of Australia. I mean, the 40% of their trade with China. So the repercussion that Australia has is that, China stops buying Australian product, wine and so on. Where does China buy in return? In the US. How can you imagine? The US
Yeah.
pushes Australia to go against China, and then China what it does, it stops buying to Australia, buys it in the US. How absurd is that?
Yeah. And it's just the same thing over and over again. It makes, you have to think what's going on in the minds of these people. And you see this, there's this one member of parliament from Lithuania. I don't know what his name is, but he's got a really big mouth on Twitter. And it's just like, don't you see what you're doing? You're like burning your country to the ground to please Washington. And what are you personally getting out of it? Because you look ridiculous. And what is your country getting out of it? Your country is evaporating. What is anyone getting out of this? It's very sad to see. And you see a lot of people, the first time they've ever heard of Lithuania is because of this story. And that is not the right way for your country to gain recognition internationally by being a joke and being thrown into the fire by your supposed allies in Washington. I also saw someone in the comments talking about students going to China to study. And what are they studying? They're studying science, technology, engineering, things like architecture, design, and then they're going back to their country to help build it up. And this is completely different than the US. The US has all of these scholarships where they bring people over. What are they studying? They're studying things like political science and journalism. And what is this actually? This is the US brainwashing people, sending them back to their country to prepare a beachhead for US influence. That's what that is. And so you can compare and contrast how the US is doing things and how China is doing things. All of these students in China studying engineering to go back to their countries to build stuff. And these scholarships like the Fulbright or the UK's Chevening or the Young Southeast Asia Leadership Initiative, they just go to the West to get brainwashed. And then they come back and they are, they're key players, ticking time bombs for political instability in their country. They're not building anything, and they never will. Very sad. By the way, if anyone has any questions, just ask your questions in the comment section. Q&A is open the entire episode. Angela, is there anything else, any other big thing that we're missing that happened this year?
Just what you mentioned just before. Look at the profile of politicians in the US and profile of politicians in China. In the US, you have lawyers, you have businessmen, you have bankers that are in politics. I mean, that's the profile. How many engineers do you have? I mean, not many. When you look at the profile of CPC members, I mean, there's a huge proportions of engineers. When you talk to engineers, we are talking about hard science. And you have the repercussion then also into the population of China. You have this is why in China you have 5 times more people that are from the hard science. I mean, science, math, technology, and then in the US. And I think it's very interesting to see, because of that, we are going to have, I mean, a huge repercussion into innovation. I mean, look at the world that actually China is building. It is going so fast. It's exponential because you have millions of engineers on the market every year, and the country is investing into those engineers, into those new science. And this is what is scary for the West, is that now the innovation comes from China, and they're putting application that are very beneficial for the world. I mean, green energy. What does green energy, all those technology come from now? I mean, from China. 5G. I mean, China is already preparing for 6G.
Yeah.
While the US has actually threatened its allies just to go with China on the 5G, so they have to wait for 2 more years in order to have I don't know what they're going to have, if it's going to be a real 5G, but they need to stop that development just because they need to listen to their masters. So you see, I think it's exciting on the other side. I mean, especially I think you like everything which is related to space discovery, like going to the moon and Mars. I think China is leading the way there, and I think we are close to a new Sputnik moment. I think that where the the US, the West is going to be extremely embarrassed, really. But it is already embarrassed. I mean, think about the high-speed railway. There's actually, I think Jason Lightfoot, he wanted to do to compare high-speed railway between China and the US. Well, the problem is there's none. There's none.
Yeah.
He had to change topic and compare the metro in China and the metro in the US. I mean, that's how bad it is. And imagine what it could bring. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I'm not a scientific, but what it could bring to have 100,000 kilometers of high-speed railway in the US. You know how bad is the traffic, how bad it pollutes. Imagine how better would be everything. It has an impact of connecting, of creating economic hubs, against pollution. I mean, lead time. I mean, imagine, like you could go from one coast to another just in a few hours. It would be dramatic change, and that's for the population. It's a no-brainer, and that is human right, really. That is, so it's just
I've heard arguments about why the U.S. cannot develop high-speed rail, and they say, we have to respect human rights, and we can't just steal people's property. I mean, how do you think the original rail network in the U.S. was built? They just asked politely, and everyone gave their land to the U.S. government.
Well, they had to kill the Indian first.
Yeah, they also wiped out an entire race.
Indians take their lands, and actually, and sometimes you had some white that had already the land, and then somehow they had to expropriate, but give money. Actually,
they do that. They still do that in the U.S. for stuff.
But I think it's also cultural. You see, you have in the West, you have it's all based on the individual, and in Asia, you live in Asia, you know that the people think in terms of society, and what is good, what is bad. I mean, if you want to develop as a nation, you need to think in terms of society. How powerful is that? Think about it. When I stop thinking about myself, and you see it in the behavior of when it comes to COVID in the West, like you had people that don't want to take masks. And what in Asia, actually, the tradition of putting mask on when you have a flu, it's because you don't want to infect other people. In the West, it's completely different. You will protect yourself from others. So you see, I think we need to look at how better it would be if we were to think in terms of society, local level, but also on the global level. You see, the West is claiming, we want democracy, we want democracy. The real democracy happens at the highest level. We are talking about the UN. We are talking about, you have engagement, international engagement treaties. Don't break the treaties. How many treaties have been broken? We are talking the Paris Accord, GCPOA. I mean, how many? So many examples. How credible is that? And from one administration to another, okay, we join again. But how credible is that? Do we want a world that is led by a nation which is very emotional, where you have the risk of having some crazy guy? I mean, the last two guys, come on, just Trump and Biden. The US has many smart people, but you got the worst there. I mean, how worse? You have a senile guy, and you have another which is egocentric guy. I mean, is it what democracy is bringing to the world? No, no thanks. No, but no thanks.
What's interesting about Trump and Biden is that, especially look at the Iran nuclear deal. This was something that unelected corporate financier-funded think tanks, this is something that they had determined all the way back in 2009, before it was ever signed by Obama. And they said, we're going to make this deal with Iran, and then we're going to destroy it. We're going to sabotage it. We're going to blame it on Iran, and then we're going to use that as an excuse to increase aggression against Iran and make it look like we tried and Iran is just irrational and bent on war. And we could do to Iran what we did to Iraq. This is what they had planned before it was ever signed by Obama. And so when Trump came in, they act as if this was this was Trump's idea to walk away. No, it was determined even before Obama signed it. And so he walked away with it. He played his role just like he used to do for professional wrestling. He would come in, there was a script, he had a role to play, and he would do it, and he would go home. And this is exactly what he did as president. And now the deal has been scrapped. They haven't really been able to capitalize on that because the U.S. is waning. It's everything that it is working on, this notion of might makes right. They don't have the might to make it right anymore. And so the deal was scrapped, but they couldn't go ahead with the aggression against Iran. This was something that they had planned like 10 years ago, and now they can't do it. And now Biden is saying, oh, we're going to go back to the deal, but they never wanted the deal in the first place. So this is why they're dragging their feet. And it's extremely pathetic. People that are looking at it at face value don't understand. You said you were going to go back to the deal, and now you're not. Why aren't you going back to the deal? When you understand that they never intended to make good on this deal in the first place, then you understand why Joe Biden is dragging his feet on it. It's because it was never supposed to be done. They're not ever going to return to it. Even if they do, they will never honor it. And so this is Iran sitting there. And what Iran needs to do is think about how to move forward without the U.S. because the U.S. is just like you said, you cannot depend on them. Every deal they make, if they have a way of worming out of it, they're going to. Look at the one China policy. If you read the U.S. State Department's official website, their explanation of the one China policy, there's nothing ambiguous about it at all. They don't support Taiwan independence, and yet that's all they've been doing all of this time. So very deceptive. If you want to deal with the U.S., you need to create an environment and leverage over the U.S. that physically prevents them from worming their way out, because depending on their word is foolhardy. I saw someone talk about 5G and 6G, and this is something I get all the time about 5G, 6G, COVID, all of these things. There's all these people that you're skeptical of new technology. I get that. Or you're skeptical of what people are telling you about COVID, especially in the West. Western pharmaceutical corporations are some of the most corrupt, deceitful corporations on earth in human history. That's a fact. But I mean, unless you have a lab of your own and you've tested all of this stuff yourself, how do you know the extent to which you're being lied to? And then what you're left with doing is looking at other countries who have it in their best interest for technology or for their population to be healthy. What are they doing in regards to it? What is China doing? What is Russia doing? What countries like Thailand that are kind of balancing in the middle, what are they doing? You have to kind of extrapolate, because unless you have your own lab, there's no way for you to know what does 5G and 6G actually do to the human body. I don't know. And neither do you unless you have a laboratory and you studied it. And you have to look at people who are promoting these theories of what it's actually doing to you. And then they're selling you some pill. They say you can take the pill and somehow the pill will protect you against electromagnetic radiation. That's ridiculous. That right there at face value is ridiculous. There's no way that's possible. And so you're being lied to. And it's possible that you're being lied to by both sides. You could be lied to by the U.S. government, and you could be lied to by people like Alex Jones, who's out there to make money. And he'll say anything to get attention. And there's so many people out there that will say literally anything to up their views, to get more clicks. So be very careful, because it's not one or the other. It could be neither. You have to do the research yourself, and you have to understand what the limitations are of your understanding, unless you have the tools and the ability to investigate it. Angelo, you have anything to add?
Yeah,
I get stuff like this all the time.
I think it's interesting you have those conspiracy theories that actually are mostly from the West, and it's actually very emblematic of the mistrust that people have when it comes to their government.
Yeah.
I mean, really, the people, there's one trend now, which is mistrust of my government and the media. They don't trust the media and the government, and this is showing us really just the problem, the structural problem that the West has. There's no trust. While when you go to Asia, and you've seen it in Asia, I mean, really, like people backing up their government. I mean, China it's like COVID. It's a project. Let's fight it together, and let's trust the government, and let's trust science. I personally don't take stance on when it comes to COVID. We do know that there are, we have big lobbies, and they somehow control the governments. Pharmaceuticals lobbies are evil. Firms like Pfizer are criminals. They are, of course. But now, you need to be pragmatic. But but I think for us, we chose our fight. Our fight is anti-imperialism, anti-war. I think COVID can be dividing. I know that in both camps you have people anti-vax, or for vaccines or whatever. It's not my fight. I think we need to look at a higher picture, bigger picture.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, say, you can't really be anti-vax in general, but you could be like, I don't want any product from Pfizer. But if you live in the United States, all you have to at your disposal is Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson and Johnson. All three of these companies couldn't be trusted to make baby aspirin, let alone something this essential. But that doesn't mean like the whole thing it's just like climate change. The climate is always changing, and everything impacts it, including human activity. So it could possibly be that the US government is trying to exploit it, is lying about it to a certain extent to push their agenda. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening and that we're okay and we don't need to do anything about it. People have to really do some, some critical thinking here, and not just be against it because the US government said it, so I'm just against it in completely the extreme opposite direction. That's not healthy either. That's just as bad. And also, the US knows that if they could get two sides arguing with completely irrational arguments on both sides, no one will ever get into the middle ground where an actual solution exists, like fixing US healthcare, holding these companies accountable, opening up science so it's more transparent, and all of this profit is taken out of it. That's the actual answer, not fighting for or against vaccines. It's just crazy. People got to get a more balanced approach here, I think. And like you said, Angelo, if you start talking about this stuff, people will start pulling on you in both directions, and you'll just get ripped into pieces. Because like I said, you're not allowed, the middle ground where rational thought is like the no man's land in World War I. It's just pummeled with artillery. No one's allowed to stand there. It's crazy.
Yeah, but it's interesting to know the freedom. The whole concept of freedom, especially when it comes to COVID-19, the behavior of people. Again, freedom. Where does freedom starts, and where does it stop? Actually, very often it's very mutual. Sometimes the freedoms of someone starts where others' freedom stops. It's mutual dependent. I had this in Hong Kong. Those writers going out in the street and claiming they wanted freedom, and they didn't realize that actually they were the one curtailing my freedom. You see, I think it's about mutual respect. It's about society. We come from a society, Western society, which actually cherish individual freedom. But again, when you live a little bit in the East, in Asia, you realize that people think in terms of society. They realize that, because of my freedom, I'm going to affect the rest of the people. So what there's a middle ground, where you have respecting individual freedom, but also looking at how does it impact society. So and this is why it can be very powerful when you look at China, when you have people thinking in terms of society, build this together, rather just individual. It's me, myself, and I. It's about Instagram. It's about me, and it's not. How can you? The best is, as a human being, is how you develop yourself. Self-actualization, but at the same time, how can you contribute to society? Really, at the end of the day, it's how do you contribute when you, and I think this happens when you get older age, you get towards 60, 70, you need to ask yourself your question: what was my life about on earth, and how did I contribute? And this is when it comes to, it's about society. Did I leave something here? If it was all about myself, it means that I had a meaningless life, because it's not that. So you see, you have those two worlds, and we need to balance individual freedoms and society.
Yeah, and I mean that the thing is, in society you need to have a little bit of individualism and a little bit of collectivism. And the problem in the West, just like you said, is nobody trusts the government, and no one should trust the government. I saw someone say that Moderna produced a robust vaccine. How do we know that? Because if you go through the U.S. Department of Justice's own official website, you will see every single big pharma company, one after the other, they have been caught lying about efficacy and safety over and over again, and they pay out billions of dollars every year because they get caught doing this, and then they just pay billions to resolve it, and then they continue doing business exactly in the same manner. The paying out billions to the Department of Justice is the cost of doing business in the manner that they do. There's no transparency. You can't trust it, and people would ask me, if I would ever get a vaccine. I probably would get one from Sinovac. But not from these Western corporations they are verified dishonest. They lie about everything. They are not doing it to make people healthy. They are doing it for profit only, and they don't care what the cost is in human life. Could they have produced a viable vaccine, a robust vaccine? I don't know. I don't trust them. And there's no one that's looking into it that can be trusted. They buy off journals. They buy off the media. Pfizer has a senior staff at Reuters also on their board of directors. They also have someone from the FDA on their board of directors. This is how ridiculous it is in the US. This is why no one trusts the government. But if no one trusts the government and something happens where you actually do need to have some collectivism to overcome it, you're going to fail. And that's what COVID has been about for the US. It's been about a government completely incapable of dealing with something and a society completely incapable of dealing something collectively. They're just incapable of doing it. Nothing that they're doing can be trusted. And that's not to say that, like someone said, the Great Reset. I don't know what that is. Does that mean that Russia and China are in on it also? And all of Southeast Asia, are they all in on it? And if that's the case, there's nowhere in the world you can hide. So just relax, chill out, because there's nothing you could do. If all of these countries are in on it together and they've got something planned for you, what are you going to do to stop it? Just ask yourself that. I don't think that that's happening. It has never happened in human history. I don't think this is going to be the exception. Nations are run by human beings. Human beings have self-interest. There's no reason for China to bow down to Washington, or for Russia to bow down to Washington or Beijing. They all have their own interests, and this is what creates a balance of power. This is what we talk about every week. Let's see. So yeah, we opened a big can of worms here when we brought up COVID and 5G.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
Do you see any interesting? Any questions there, Brian? Or
I'm not seeing many. Oh, okay. So here is the new UN Special Envoy in Myanmar compromised. I don't know. I got to look into them, but pretty much the UN has been in lockstep with the U.S. in regards to Myanmar. I don't think that there would be anyone coming out of the UN that would have a constructive approach toward Myanmar. I'll look it up, though. That's a very good question. I'll look that person up and find out. Let's see. No. Myanmar is a replay of what the U.S. did to Libya, to Syria. The UN was very involved in helping along, not stopping any of that. The UN is not some independent organization that is objective. What it is a reflection of global balance of power, and the U.S. and the West still have an oversized influence over the globe, and so the UN is going to serve those interests. We can see how it's kind of starting to tilt a little bit in favor of the East, but this is going to be a long process, and you have to be patient. And in terms of the UN, the US has so many people dug in like parasites in the UN to tilt everything in their favor for exactly these sort of destabilization efforts and then eventual interventions, that I highly doubt that this new person is going to bring anything positive to the table in terms of Myanmar. And even if they do try, they'll be ignored, because anyone in the UN who has spoken up or in one of these international organizations, they're just ignored. If they're saying something that is contrary to US interests, they'll be ignored, they'll be maligned, they'll be threatened. Any other questions? How much has imperialism increased or decreased in influence over the last 10, 20, or 30 years? I think it's hard to really put a number on it, but I think you could say that it's decreasing, and it's decreasing exponentially. So 30 years ago, people were resisting it. There was, a little bit of a decline here and there. And then 20 years ago, 10 years ago, you could maybe start to notice it a little bit more. And now it's like almost year by year, you're seeing a major decline, major withdrawals, major retreat. Angelo, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it's getting extremely fast. It's exponential. Remember when there was the fall of the Berlin Wall, it happened overnight. I think the collapse of the U.S. empire could also happen overnight. It would go through maybe economic collapse. I mean, once you have an economic collapse, especially, remember the financial crisis in 2008. We could have something like this, maybe even much bigger. When you look at we are into super inflation right now. We could have a transition to hyperinflation. And there would be like a ripple effect, and everything could fall apart completely. So that could happen, really overnight. We're talking about from 1 week to another, just everything stops, You see it in the budgets in the US, sometimes they cannot pay, they have to increase the ceiling, of debt every time. Otherwise, there's a collapse because of the federal budget. So I think there are a huge shift. Look at the news, really. The partnerships. Just some examples. Like India joining. Being in the SCO. Like India now you have, because there's US has less influence now. Now you have sometimes like India talking, having talks with other countries in the region. Because they have mutual interest.
Even China.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Things that were unthinkable in the past are reality now, and it's going through economics. The Belt and Road Initiative is opening new opportunities. Now you have help. I think there were talks about having food to be transit from India, Pakistan, all the way to Afghanistan. And they had to talk it to each other. The thing is that once you have the US there and it's actually taking side with one or another, it changes the whole balance. Once the US is out of the equation, then you have countries making compromises. They're like, oh, you know what? We have to define for our own fate. It changes completely the equation. The same with Taiwan. Think about it. If the US was not meddling, do you think that Taiwan would be going to the direction of independence? No way. Just to go back to Taiwan, remember the US, how many times they have dumped allies? How many times? Many times in history, many times. Well, remember Taiwan was dumped. They dumped Taiwan already once. In 1971, before that, the US was recognizing Taiwan as the only representative of China. And it dumped Taiwan in favor of China because they wanted to use China against the USSR. So they dumped you once, and you are going again siding with the US where you should be knowing that they are using you. You know how they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's it. Really, it's simple, so simple. I just wish that like Taiwanese students would have those basic information. It's not rocket science when you've been lied to, not so long ago. Are you going to fall for it once more? It's just ridiculous.
And just economically, Taiwan completely depends on the mainland because it's a province of the mainland, and it depends entirely on the mainland. And what are they getting out of the US? We'll talk about this in the next episode of Inflection, because we're going to talk about how US is trying to pillage everything of value in Taiwan so that they could just take what's left and just ram it into the mainland. And again, like, who are these people going along with this agenda? and look at countries that have already followed in these footsteps. Ukraine, for example, just throwing everything out, losing national industries that have been around for decades, all down the drain because a handful of people in power went along with the U.S. Now, because we're over an hour, let's talk about what we see coming in 2022, personally for you, Angelo, and then also what do you see unfolding on the global stage. And before I do that, I just want to show people, you have been doing a lot of writing recently, and a lot of your articles go up at .news. And here is your latest one. Let me put the link to it in the comments so people could go ahead and check that out. You want to talk a little bit about .news, how you got started writing for them, and what can we expect? Can we expect many more articles from you, Angelo, this coming year?
Yes, probably a monthly basis, 1-2 articles with .news. So, well, the last article was about, Hong Kong path to democracy, and it needs to, I went back to history, and actually it's very much linked to the white paper that Beijing has issued on Hong Kong. So it's important just to not every time when it comes to geopolitics, just not to take a snapshot. It's about looking at the past, the present, and where it is going, and so you can have a more objective view. So here it's about just going back and to its history, to the fact that democracy is it's not there's not one single model of democracy. Every country has to adapt its own model of democracy, and a lot of scholars have a hard time just to really to define what is democracy. I mean, democracy, the definition is power to the people, and is it the process? Do we have to focus on the process, or do we have to focus on deliverable? So you have those two worlds, the West and China. In the West, it's about the process, the single fact that you go to the poll and you vote for someone, that's democracy. But, in reality, you need to look at the rule of the game, who wrote the rule of the games, and is it benefiting you, and many other elements, money into politics, media, and so on. While in Hong Kong, you have maybe something which is in the middle. It's not Western style democracy, it's not China style democracy, it's something in the middle. But what is important here is that it's about deliverable. They need to deliver. And if you look at the background of people that are elected in the legislative council, which is we call it LegCo in Hong Kong, they come from all walks of societies. They're not the elite, they're very representative of the people of Hong Kong. So now we are into a new term, 4 years term, and it's going to be about, delivering. But the difference is that this is going to be probably, I would say, the most democratic elections that Hong Kong has had in its history. Remembering that before 1997, Hong Kong was a colony, and decisions were taken by a governor that was elected by the British. So now, because we have restored sovereignty of China over Hong Kong, we can start to have real democracy. No more meddling. And so I think I'm very positive about the future of Hong Kong, and especially think about it. There's a huge project of we call it the Great Bay Area, which is more than 100 million people in that whole area. The cities of Guangzhou, Macau, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is going to play a very strategic role here. Like it has always done. Hong Kong is the bridge for China with the West. So it's going to play a critical part there. So I'm very positive. And I'm glad. I mean, the best victory really the last 2 years was the enacting of the national security law. Because if there was no national security law, I mean, Hong Kong would be a new Syria. It would be extremely chaotic. It would be just madness.
And then overall around the globe, what do you see playing out next year?
I think it's going to get worse. I mean, worse before it gets better. I think still they are going to push the red lines. We have two red lines. I mean, China is the red line not just to cross. It's Taiwan. I mean, this Taiwan is there's no discussion. You cannot negotiate on Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China. Full stop. And on the other side, Ukraine. I think there are two fronts there, and then there's another one, Iran. It's just. But I don't see going into hot war. But the tensions are going to get higher and higher, and I think it's going to be a year for the U.S. who they are going to keep on trying to get alliances. But it's not working. But they'll try really hard. And it's going to be a year of huge propaganda. I mean, remember, the US has signed a bill of $300 million, which is for the single purpose to demonize China. So it's going to be extremely, I mean, over and over demonizing China. And this money that is being spent in the media, it's not the big ones. I'm expecting actually YouTubers, they are going to put their hands into media that we wouldn't expect, especially the leftist media. You would be expecting them to be more neutral. We need to be careful about that, because you can buy people, you can buy, and 300 million, it goes a long way. And I mean, especially imagine 300 million. What if only 100 million was going to the global south? You have journalists. I mean, how much does it cost to buy a journalist just for one article? I mean, $50. Many journalists, if you give them $50, they'll buy an article anti-Chinese. How many articles can you buy with $300 million?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. I mean, it's just, and I think there's going to be escalation on the propaganda against China and Russia. Bad, evil. I mean, always this BS about human rights. Human right abuses. I think I mentioned to you. It's what we call reverse accusation. When you reverse the oppressor and the victim. It's the oppressor that actually is blaming the victim for what the oppressor does.
Yeah. Exactly.
It is crazy. It would be like Hitler in World War II complaining about how evil, that actually Jewish are genociding Germans. I mean, that's how.
I think he kind of probably was saying ridiculous stuff like that, especially toward the end about the Russians. I mean, he invaded them first, and then what did he expect would happen in return? And it's like, just like you say, history is playing it out over and over again the same way. Ordinary people don't learn. And people in power do learn. They know they can get away with it because people don't understand. So I think, and this asymmetrical strategy that the U.S. is using, I think we could expect an uptick in that over the next year. 2022 will be the year of dirty media, pushing for more sanctions, and I think pushing those red lines. And I personally, I would not rule out a armed conflict with China, because people seem to think that it's too extreme, but then you have to think about how extreme to the West it is for a non-white nation to permanently surpass them. That is what China will do if the U.S. does not stop China. And for them, I don't think that there's any price too high to pay to try to stop that. I honestly believe that we're at this very dangerous crossroad. And I think once we pass it, we will kind of know that we're past it. But I don't think that we're there yet. I don't think that we're at the point where the U.S. just accepts that this is going to happen. There's nothing they can do about it. I think they still think they can. And unfortunately, I still believe that they might still be able to do something to derail China. People think China is the answer to everything. China has limitations. Russia has limitations, very serious limitations. This is why they had to pick between Libya or Syria, because they couldn't save both, because they have real world limitations on what they can do. The U.S. is still positioned with its military all over the globe. They could seriously disrupt Chinese supply chains physically with their military assets. And this would be something that China would be defenseless against. Their military is in China. Chinese military is in China. It's not all over the world where they can defend their supply chains wrapping around the globe. The U.S. can disrupt them. So this is what I think is going to unfold in 2022. We're going to have to be on the lookout for this. The very next episode of Inflection that we do is going to focus on Taiwan and Hong Kong, these pressure points the U.S. is using. And I think we're going to have to start getting into Ukraine and Belarus, because this is the other, the East and West front the U.S. is setting up here. It's very dangerous. I could see a conflict taking place between Ukraine and Russia, or proxies of either side or both sides. I could see that happening. Personally, so Angelo, is there anything else personally you have planned for next year, or just gonna just keep doing what you're doing, try to do it a little bit better as much as possible?
No, I think it's about balancing. You know how emotional it can be. You know, it's not. You know, I don't have much fun to do that. I think, but I need to have to do it a minimum, so I can look at myself in the mirror and think that I am doing the right thing. I think it's about just managing when it comes emotionally, that, you know, just trying to be objective, give the information out there, you know, and that's the most important. For next year, nothing special. I'm just glad to join your show. Really, I love what you're doing, you know, and I think it's important just, you know, to give each other support, you know, really just because it's a brave, it's very noble fight, you know, what you're doing. So just I mean, keep on supporting your show, and just the same, just trying to be healthy and trying to be sane mentally, you know, because it's insane. It is insane when you look at, you know, it's not. Sometimes it's just, there's so much blatant lies, you know. It's just crazy, you know. You just there's so much mistrust. Sometimes you have to read exactly the opposite, you know, when they're saying that this one did a massacre. You just realize, you know, when it comes to Myanmar, you just have to take the opposite information and just try, and then trying to dig, you know, and it's and the whole digging is painful, you know, because you go through some really bad, evil stuff, you know. So just a bit cynical, just wish, you know, human being would be just different, you know. But at the highest level, you know, when people are seeking power, you know, it's not like you and I. I mean, you know, average Joe is fighting for what he puts on the table. You know, once you are part of the elites, you know, you've had your Ferrari, you have a house in 10 different countries. So how do you? I mean, what do you care about your country? You don't, you know, because if you have a house in Taiwan, but you know Taiwan is destroyed, but you have a house in Monaco. You know, it's different, you know, but they're evil, you know, because it's never enough. It's never enough. I would say just, you know, when it comes to the West, I think the transition with China being the largest superpower, and the de-dollarization, it is going to have a huge impact on Western society in terms of standard of living. You know, keeping in mind that, again, you know, it's you know, it's been living very good growth, you know, but this is at the expense of the global South, which is starving, doesn't have any road, no electricity. So ultimately, it's that, you know, I mean, really, this is what I want to make the pro-Western clan side, make them realize that if they need to be consistent, they need to really understand that, okay, if you're siding for US imperialism, you are also siding for this inhumane position, that is, you have a high standard of living at the expense of 90% of the world, which is starving. If they agree with that, then it's okay. I mean, you know, it's okay. I mean, we're just different, but we need to be consistent, you know. And if you want to be consistent in terms of human rights, well, you need to look at that, you know, equal opportunities for the whole world, and just balance growth, you know, sharing the wealth. You know, there's plenty of wealth. We can share it.
Yep. Totally agree. And that's kind of like what we got to keep working on. Just try to reach as many people as possible. Try to make sure our information is as accurate as possible, continue digging, just like you say, doing a balance. I just kind of want to show people, of course, I'm going to continue doing the videos that I've been doing. We're going to continue doing Inflection once a week. I'm doing a new series of videos where I take a look at positive businesses or projects that people are working on to kind of balance power, locally, nationally, globally. Just some positive news to kind of mix in with everything else, because like you said, Angelo, if you're just digging through horrible stuff every single day, it takes a toll. It does. And you got to break out of it every once in a while. And I don't want to break out of it by taking a break and disappearing. I want to still put stuff out there for people to see and to consider and to add into the whole mix, and to realize you're not helpless. There's all kinds of things that you can do, not just in terms of media. If media is not your thing, you can start a local business. And think about this. If money is power, and you're sending all of your money to Wall Street and Washington, just for example, you're sending all of your power there also. If you're spending money locally, you're making money locally, you're also keeping that power local. Keep that in mind. So I'm going to be doing a series of videos in addition to everything else, focusing on local businesses, starting here in Thailand, but there's no reason why if I find something interesting abroad, I wouldn't cover that also. I also have a totally different channel that I do my industrial design stuff on. And because I have no time to take on clients and make money doing industrial design, all of this is open source. I do free designs and I put it out there. And I'm trying to, I had been, and I'm going to start again, making things like medical equipment, laboratory equipment that is open source that anyone anywhere in the world can make. I have right off camera, I have 3 3D printers that I make these things on. I design it in 3D and then physically make it. And so I share all of this information, tutorials, how to make it. And again, this is to keep sane. Instead of digging in like war and atrocities and US interference every single day, you have to balance it. And I want to balance it with something positive. So these are some of the things that I have started doing at the end of this year and will continue doing well into next year. I'm going to try to improve the quality of my videos. If you look at the videos that I was making in January of this year, 2021, they're so terrible. I can't even believe I was making those. And so I hope by the end of 2022, the quality is so much better that I look back at these videos and just say, what was I thinking? And I just want to thank everyone. Angelo, I mean, if it wasn't for you and the other people on Twitter that supported me in the very beginning, I wouldn't have started making videos in the first place. And I really do appreciate you coming on every week, taking time. It's not just when we're making the show, we have to do research before it. So this all takes time. This is stuff that happens off camera that people might not realize. So I really appreciate the time that you take to do that. And it really does help having other people involved and helping out. It really does. It makes a huge difference. So thank you. I want to thank everyone in my audience now and people who have been supporting me over the last year or so, and to everyone supporting me in absolutely every way. I could not do this without that support. So thank you all. Angelo, have a very happy New Year, a happy and healthy New Year. I will see you on the other side. And everyone else, please have a safe, happy, and healthy New Year. And let's try to do our best next year, start the year off on a good foot and just do our best, do what we can. Angelo, any last thoughts?
No, thanks to all the followers. I mean, really, we get some great comments, always nice questions. I mean, thanks for everyone the support. I mean, really, it's important. There's a huge community, and we all aiming for the same thing. Give information and try to avoid confrontation. Really, to build a better world.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks again. Thank you, Angelo, and until next week. Bye for now.